was intended for something more important than the mere gathering of prunes and apricots. Of this Manuel felt sure. Confrontation by Raymond Barrio. No matter which way he turned, he was trapped in an endless maze of apricot trees, as though forever, neat rows of them neatly planted, row after row, just like the blackest bars on a jail. There had to be an end, there had to be. There trapped, there had to be a way out. Locked, there had to be a respite. Animal, the buckets and the crates kept piling up higher. Brute, he felt alone, though surrounded by other pickers. Beast, though he was perspiring heavily, his shirt was powdered dry. Savage, the hot, dry air sucking every drop of living moisture from his brute body. Wreck, he stopped and walked to the farthest end of the first row for some water, raised the dented dipper from the brute tank, drank the holy water in great brute gulps so he wouldn't have to savor its tastelessness, letting it spill down his torn shirt to cool his exhausted body, to replenish his brute cells and animal pores and stinking follicles and pig rustle, a truly refined wreck of an animal. Pleased to meet ya, predator. Lunch. Almost too exhausted to eat, he munched his cheese with tortillas smoked on ashes, then lay back on the cool ground for a half an hour. That short rest in the hot shade replenished some of his humor and resolve. He felt his spirit swell out again, like a thirsty sponge in water. Then, up again, the trees, the branches again, the briar branches, the scratching leaves, the twigs tearing at his shirt sleeves, the ladder, the rough bark, the endlessly and unending piling up of bucket upon box, upon crate, upon stack, upon rack, upon mound, upon mountain. He picked a mountain of cots automatically, an automator, a beast, a ray of enemy sun penetrated the tree that was hiding him and split his forehead open. His mind whirred. He backed out. Luckily, he'd been leaning against a heavy branch. His feet hooked to the ladder's rung. His half-full bucket slipped from his grasp and fell in slow motion, splattering the fruit he'd so laboriously picked to the ground. Robert happened by and shook his head. "What's the matter? Can't you see straight?" Manuel was too tired even to curse. He should have had some salt pills. Mid-afternoon. The summer's fierce zenith passed overhead. It passed, then dropped. It started to light the ocean behind him, back of the hills. Sandy dreams, cool nights, cold drinks, soft guitar music with Lupe sitting beside him, all wafting through his feverish moments. Tiredness drained his spirit of will. Exhaustion drained his mind. His fingers burned. His arms flailed the innocent trees. He was slowing down. He could hardly fill his last bucket. Suddenly the whistle blew. The day's work was at last ended. Ended. The contratista, Roberto Morales, stood there, his feet straddled, Mexican style, a real robber, a Mexican general, a gentlemanly, friendly, polite, grinning, vicious, thieving brute, the worst kind, to his own people. Despite his being a fellow Mexican, despite his torn, old clothing, everyone knew what kind of a clever criminal he was. Despite his crude, ignorant manner, showing that he was one of them, that he'd started with them, that he grew up with them, that he'd suffered all the sordid deprivations with them, he was actually the shrewdest, smartest, richest cannibal in 40 counties around. They sure couldn't blame the Guerros for this miscarriage. He was a crew chief. How could anyone know what he did to his own people? And what did the Guerros care? So the Anglo growers and the Guerro executives, smiling in their cool, filtered offices, puffing their elegant, thin cigars, washed their clean, blonde, bloodless, dirtless hands of the whole matter. All they did was hire Roberto Morales, firm, fair, and square, for an agreed-upon price. Good. How he got his people down to the pickings was no concern of theirs. They were honest, those Guerros. They could sleep at night. They fulfilled their end of the bargain and cheated no one. Their only crime, their only sole crime indeed, was that they just didn't care how that migratory scum lived. It was no concern of theirs. Their religion said it was no concern of theirs. Their wife said it was no concern of theirs. Their alderman said it was no concern of theirs. Whenever Roberto Morales spoke, Manuel had to force himself not to answer. He had to keep his temper from flaring. "Now," announced Morales at last, in his friendliest tone, "now I must take 2 cents from every bucket. I'm sorry, there was a miscalculation. Everybody understands? Everybody?" He slid his eyes around, smiling, palms up. The tired, exhausted pickers gasped as one. Yes, everyone understood, freezing in place after all that hard work. "Any questions, men?" Morales grinned, knowing everyone realized that he had the upper hand, that would mean a loss of $2 or $3 out of each picker's pay that day, a huge windfall for Morales. "You promised to take nothing," Manuel heard himself saying. Everyone turned in astonishment to stare at Manuel. "I said 2 cents, hombre. You got a problem or what?" "You promised." The two men centered in a huge ring of red-ringed eyes glared at each other, reaching for each other's jugular. The other exhausted animals studied the tableau through widening eyes. It was so unequal. Morales remained calm, confident, studying Manuel, as though memorizing his features. He had the whole advantage. Then, with his last remaining energy, Manuel lifted his foot and clumsily tipped over his own last bucket of cots. They rolled away in all directions around everyone's feet. Roberto Morales' eyes blazed, his fists clenched. "You picked them up, Gutierrez." Oh, so he knew his name, after all. For answer, Manuel kicked over another bucket, and again the fruit rolled away in all directions. And then an astonishing thing happened. All the other pickers moved toward their own buckets, still standing beside them on the ground, awaiting the truck gatherer, and took an ominous position over them, straddling their feet over them. Without looking around, without taking his eyes off Manuel, Roberto Morales said sharply, all right, men. I shall take nothing this time." Manuel felt a thrill of power course through his nerves. He had never won anything before. He would have to pay for this, for his defiance, somehow, again later. But he had shown defiance. He had salvaged his money savagely, and he had earned respect from his fellow slaves. The big bosses would never know of this incident, and would probably be surprised and perhaps even a little mortified for a few minutes. But they wouldn't care. It was bread, pan y tortillas out of his children's mouths, but they still wouldn't give a single hoot. Manuel had wrenched Morales' greedy fingers away and removed a fat slug of a purse from his sticky grasp, and in his slow way, in his stupid, accidental, dangerous way, Manuel had made an extravagant discovery, as Don Gaspar had also made 2 centuries before in almost the exact same spot. And that was that a man counted for something. For men, Manuel dimly suspected, are built for something more important and less trifling than the mere gathering of prunes and apricots hour upon hour, decade upon decade, insensibly, mechanically, ant-like. Men are built to experience a certain sense of honor and pride, or else they are dead before they die.